January 9th, 1945. Oberstleutnant Werner Haupt, logistics intelligence analyst for Army Group G, was reviewing captured American supply manifests taken from a destroyed convoy near Biche, France, when he found something that did not belong in a logistics document. Not a tactical intelligence item. A ghost. The manifests listed 412 M1943 field coats. Winter weight, wool-lined, the coat that kept a soldier functional at -10 degrees Celsius, as having departed a forward supply depot near Metz on December 29, 1944. Destination, the 3916th Quartermaster Truck Company, and 2 attached signal detachments. All 3 units were composed of black soldiers operating in 3rd Army's rear area supply corridor. The coats had been signed out. The receiving signatures existed. The coats themselves did not. They had not arrived. 412 winter coats, in the coldest January in the Ardennes in 40 years, had entered a supply chain and vanished between a depot and the black units that needed them. Haupt was not an American. He was not responsible for what had happened. But he had spent 2 years reading American supply records for operational intelligence, and he knew what a ghost in a manifest meant. He wrote 3 words in the margin of his analysis: Absicht oder Nachlässigkeit. Intent or negligence. He circled it. Then he put the question aside, because he assumed it would resolve itself the way these things resolve themselves in the American military, slowly, through channels, and not at all. The winter of 1944 to 1945 was the coldest European winter in a generation, and cold, in that season, was not a comfort problem. It was a casualty problem. The United States Army's medical records for the European Theater of Operations document 45,283 cold weather casualties, frostbite, trench foot, hypothermia, between November 1944 and March 1945. The figure represented approximately 14% of all non-combat American casualties in that period. It exceeded the casualty rate from several major engagements. Cold killed men who had survived combat intact, and it degraded the performance of men who survived the cold, reduced dexterity, impaired judgment, decreased willingness to maintain exposed fighting positions. The M1943 field coat was one of the Army's primary responses to this problem. It weighed 4 pounds and 7 ounces, provided insulation to -15 degrees Celsius in dry conditions, and had been in adequate supply, not surplus, but adequate, since October 1944. Adequate meant that units which received their allocated shipments were protected. Units which did not, were not. German intelligence analysts had noted the cold weather casualty figures with professional interest. Haupt's quarterly assessment for the period October through December 1944, filed with Army Group G on January 3, 1945, had specifically identified cold weather degradation as a factor in American forward unit performance along the Moselle corridor. His analysis was that units suffering high rates of cold injury would be less reliable in sustained defensive or offensive operations than their nominal strength suggested. He had not connected this analysis to the question of supply chain integrity within the American military. He had assumed, as a professional logistician evaluating an enemy's system, that American supply allocation, whatever its other problems, was at minimum racially uniform. The manifests from the Biche convoy suggested it was not, and the implications of that, for his analysis of American rear area operational reliability, were something he had not yet calculated. The 412 winter coats had not been lost. They had been redirected. The redirection had been accomplished by a supply depot warrant officer named Hensley at the forward depot outside Metz, who had received the outgoing manifest for the 3916th and its attached detachments on December 28, 1944, reviewed the unit designations, identified them as black units, and made a decision that he executed with the confident efficiency of a man performing a routine task. He altered the destination coding on the manifest to redirect the shipment to 2 white infantry replacement depots operating in the same sector. He signed the alteration with his own name, which suggests he did not anticipate consequences or did not care about them, with the same confident efficiency. The original allocation documentation remained in the depot's records. The discrepancy was visible to anyone who looked at both documents simultaneously. No one at the depot level looked. No one at the intermediate logistics level looked. The black soldiers of the 3966th, the 3132nd Signal Service Battalion, and the 512th Signal Company entered the coldest weeks of January 1945 without their allocated winter coats, in temperatures that dropped to -14 degrees Celsius on January 12th, while the coats sat in replacement depots serving white infantry units that had already received their own cold weather allocations and now had surplus. Staff Sergeant Elmore Washington, the same Elmore Washington who had filed the accurate after-action report in November that reached Patton's desk, had kept copies of the original supply manifest. He had kept them because he had learned, in 11 months of service in the European theater, that documentation was the only reliable instrument available to a black soldier with a complaint that the institution did not want to receive. He submitted the discrepancy up his chain of command on January 7th. The submission reached 3rd Army's Inspector General Section on January 8th. It reached Patton's daily briefing summary on January 9th. The same day that Oberstleutnant Haupt was writing Absicht oder Nachhaltigkeit in the margin of his convoy manifest analysis. 70 kilometers away. Patton's response to the January 9th briefing item was, by his own staff's accounts, not the explosive reaction that his public reputation might suggest. Codman's diary records that Patton read the item, set it aside, finished the briefing, and then asked Codman to bring him the original depot records. The records arrived by courier at 1400 hours. Patton spent 22 minutes with them. He did not shout. He did not dictate a memo. He put on his coat, told Codman to get the staff car, and drove to the depot outside Metz. He arrived at 1620 hours. Warrant Officer Hensley was located and brought to the depot commandant's office, where Patton was waiting. The conversation that followed lasted 6 minutes. Codman waited outside and recorded, in his diary, that he could not hear the words through the office door, but could establish the general's emotional register from the quality of the silences between sentences, which he described as the kind of silence that precedes a sentence the listener will remember for the rest of his life. Hensley was in military custody by 1700 hours, charged under the Uniform Code with theft of government property and falsification of official documents. Both charges were documentable from the records already in Patton's hands. The trial was convened within 72 hours and the conviction recorded on January 14, 1945. The sentence was reduction in grade and transfer to a forward infantry unit, a disposition that Patton had specifically requested rather than the administrative separation that the charges might have supported. The request was, in the specific operational language Patton used to explain it to the judge advocate officer who questioned it, so that Warrant Officer Hensley can spend some time on the receiving end of decisions made by people who think some men are more expendable than others. But the conviction was only the first of 3 actions Patton took in the week following January 9th. The second was an order requiring all supply depot manifests in 3rd Army's rear area to carry dual signatures, the issuing officer and a confirming officer at a separate administrative level, for any shipment with a changed destination coding. The change added 14 minutes to the processing time for altered manifests. It made undocumented redirection nearly impossible. It was a structural repair, not a punishment. The third action was the one that Oberstleutnant Haupt, following the story through subsequent prisoner interrogations, found most operationally significant. Patton personally drove to the 3916th's operating area on January 13th, 4 days after the briefing item, with a convoy carrying 412 replacement winter coats. He did not send an aide. He did not send a logistics officer. He drove the convoy himself. He arrived at 0900 hours. He found the men of the 3916th at formation. He told them, in the specific, unambiguous language that his staff had learned to recognize as Patton operating at maximum sincerity, that the coats had been stolen, that the man who stole them had been convicted, and that this was their equipment and they were entitled to it. He left by 10:15 hours. The story left with him, traveling through the rear area supply network at the same speed that the story about Corporal Webb's dinner had traveled 6 weeks earlier. January 16, 1945. The 3916th Quartermaster Truck Company, now equipped with its winter coats, was running a supply convoy through the Saar corridor when a section of road was hit by interdiction artillery from a German battery operating out of the Siegfried Line's outer defensive zone. The barrage was not heavy, 6 rounds, 105 mm, over approximately 4 minutes, but it struck the convoy at a point where the road ran through a defile with no immediate covered exit, and it destroyed 2 trucks and wounded 4 drivers, one of them critically. The remaining drivers did not abandon the convoy. They drove through the barrage, delivered the load, fuel for armored units of the 4th Armored Division, operating 22 miles forward, and reported the engagement with the flat precision of men who have decided that the mission is not negotiable regardless of the conditions. The 4th Armored Division's fuel log for January 16, 1945, archived in the National Archives under Record Group 407, records the delivery at 13:47 hours. The division's S4, the logistics officer, noted in his daily record that the delivery arrived on schedule despite reported road interdiction. He did not know about the barrage. He did not know about the 4 wounded drivers. He did not know about the 412 winter coats that had been stolen in late December and replaced in the second week of January by a general who drove his own convoy. He knew only that the fuel arrived when it was supposed to arrive, which meant the 4th Armored could continue its advance, which meant the operational timeline held. That is what logistics looks like when it works. The mechanism is invisible. What is visible is the outcome. Oberstleutnant Haupt received an updated intelligence summary on January 20th that included, in the rear area activity section, a brief account of the interdiction on January 16th and the 3916th's continued operation despite it. His annotation, added to his running analysis of American rear area reliability, read, "Diese Einheiten weichen nicht zurück." These units do not pull back. He had been expecting, based on his cold weather casualty analysis and his assessment of the supply disruption he had identified from the Bitch manifests, that Black American rear area formations would show measurable degradation in operational reliability during the January cold. They had not. He noted this with the honest frustration of an analyst whose model had failed, then spent a paragraph attempting to account for the failure by attributing the 3916th's performance to exceptional circumstances. The exceptional circumstances he identified were cold weather equipment adequacy and what he described, without apparent awareness of its source, as evident unit morale inconsistent with prior assessments of colored American formations. He was right about both. He could not have known that the two were connected, or that the connection ran through a general in a staff car with a convoy of 412 coats. The formal record of Warrant Officer Hensley's trial is preserved in the Judge Advocate General's records at the National Archives, filed under 3rd Army legal proceedings for January 1945. The conviction is documented. The sentence is documented. What is also documented in the Inspector General's running report for the same period is the effect of Patton's dual signature mandate on supply manifest alteration. Between August 1944 and January 9, 1945, the Inspector General's records show 37 documented supply diversions from black units to white units across 3rd Army's operational area. 37 instances where allocated equipment, food, fuel, or clothing was redirected through manifest alteration. Between January 10, 1945, and the German surrender on May 8, 1945, 118 days under the dual signature requirement, the Inspector General's records show 37 in 5 months, 3 in 4 months. The structural repair had worked at a ratio that no disciplinary action alone could have produced. You cannot punish a habit into non-existence. You can change the conditions that make the habit executable. Patton did both. The 39 16th Quartermaster Truck Company received a unit commendation in March 1945 for sustained operational performance under adverse conditions. The adverse conditions cited in the commendation included artillery interdiction, road deterioration, and extended operational tempo. They did not cite the 5 weeks between December 29th and January 13th when the unit had operated in -14-degree temperatures without its allocated winter clothing, because the commendation's author did not know about those 5 weeks. Staff Sergeant Washington knew. He had the original manifests. He kept them. Hope's post-war testimony, given to American military historians in Heidelberg in 1949, addressed his January cold weather analysis directly. He was asked whether the analysis had proven accurate. He said it had proven accurate for white American formations and inaccurate for black ones, and that he had not, at the time, understood why. He was asked whether he understood now. He paused for a long moment. Then he said, "I think someone fixed something. I did not know it had been fixed. My analysis was based on the broken version. Here is the counterintuitive truth that Hope's analysis had encoded as a prediction, and that the 39/16 January performance had refused to confirm. Logistical deprivation degrades unit effectiveness, but only when the unit has no reason to believe the deprivation will be corrected. A unit that has been deprived and then resupplied, especially when the resupply is accompanied by the specific signal that someone with authority identified the deprivation as wrong and corrected it personally, does not perform at the level of the deprivation. It performs at the level of the correction." The coats mattered. What mattered more was the convoy that delivered them, and who was driving it, and what that said to the men watching it arrive. The 412 coats were logistics. The general driving the convoy was something else. It was a signal, transmitted in the specific frequency that institutions rarely use, because it requires the people at the top to do something that costs them nothing material and everything in terms of time and attention. To show up personally at the location of the problem and demonstrate, through physical presence, that the problem was real and the correction was real, and the people who had been failed by the system were worth the drive. The lesson is not about winter coats. It is about what correction signals. A system that fails its people and then corrects the failure anonymously, through channels, on a schedule determined by administrative convenience, signals that the failure was a process error. A system that fails its people and then corrects the failure personally, visibly, with the general driving the convoy, signals something else entirely. It signals that the people who were failed are the kind of people worth correcting for. That signal travels faster than any convoy. It arrives before the coats do. And the unit that receives both, the signal and the coats, performs at a level the unit that received neither cannot reach, and the unit that received only the coats cannot sustain. Fix the system. Show up when you fix it. In that order. Every time.